Yeah. As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'm on roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning and happy Friday to all our listeners. First of all, I'd like to thank Tom Ficklin, who allows me to host this show once a month with my co-host, Bernard Macklin. Tom is doing well in his recovery. I talked to him yesterday for quite some time on the phone. So for all those who are concerned, Tom's doing well, but any sense is blessings. So we are privileged today on a Real Talk show. We're going to continue our third series discussion of stopping violence in the New Haven area. But we are doing with what the community asked. The first two shows, we had all male panels, and the community asked, why do we not have women and their perspective to this major problem that consists of the whole family? And so we've responded. We have our panel this morning ready to dive into this robust discussion. As always, and as I always remind, we are here to come up with solutions to the problem. We do not play the blame game on Real Talk, because everyone that's associated with the city, lives in the city, and lives in this community. It is our opportunity to work together. We are always better together. So I'm going to introduce my co-host, Bernard Macklin, and then he'll allow our panelists 2 minutes to just say your name, what you've been involved in reference to stopping violence, because you all have been involved in this over the years, and what is a perspective that we want to go forward before we get into discussion. Everybody will have about 2 minutes. So I'll turn it over to my co-host, Bernard Macklin.
Good morning, everybody. We are so excited to have these beautiful panelists on the show today to bring us their perspective. And I'm just going to start with actually Ms. Barbara, if you could just come in and introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Barbara Fair. I was born and raised in New Haven. Most of my life, as far back as I can remember, has been working on criminal justice, prisons, community violence, all of those kind of things that impact our community. And so I raised my children most of the time in New Haven, so I got to see a lot of the things that we're dealing with today. I dealt with a lot of that with my own family, and having 7 boys. I was right there on the front line many of the times. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so that also gives me. I also have a viewpoint from the clinical perspective, and not so much looking at focus on people's behavior, but also zeroing in on the what causes the behavior and what we can do to change it. And so that's what I do. Thank you.
So welcome. And I'm just looking right next to you, one of our community leaders. I've always been one to step up. Miss Shirley, can you just come on in and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good morning. I'm Shirley Ellis West, and I currently serve as the Executive Director for Urban Community Alliance, which is a result of a merger between the New Haven Family Alliance and the Vets Mentoring Program. I have served at the New Haven Family Alliance for almost 30 years in various capacities, working with children and children, youth, and families in the community. In addition to that, in reference to the violence, for many of those years at the New Haven Family Alliance, I was able to have leadership and oversight over the Street Outreach Worker Program. A program that was initiated by Mayor DeStefano during a time where we saw community violence at this level. I'm going to say that to say that, you know, my experience and involvement with the Street Outreach Worker Program was valuable in giving me insight, not only in what was required in helping young people to think about and modify behaviors, but also what we could do as a community and together in improving or reducing violence in the community. So right now, I feel like we've been here before, and so let's think about let's not, how do they say, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but think about some of the things we've done before and where we can use those things. But in addition to that, really think about what these young people need almost 10 years later, 15 years later, that may look a little different than some of the things we've done before.
That is so wonderful. Thank you. And I'm just going to keep going right across and bringing in just another voice that I know wait to hear. Miss Leslie, come on in and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. I count it an honor and a privilege to be on here with these strong and wonderful women of New Haven, and the invitation. I'm a lifelong resident of the city of New Haven. Recently retired, so I get to spend a lot more time just sitting on my counter and looking out the window, seeing what's going on in my neighborhood. I've been involved in, I guess you may call it, community activism, you know, for a while. I don't work for an agency, and most of the work that I've done is on a local level, whatever neighborhood that I live in, serving on management teams. I do hold a couple of positions with some municipal boards and local boards. I have had the opportunity to help establish a community garden on Truman Street. And so that's where a lot of the work, I guess you might call it, that I do in the neighborhood stems from the activities there. A lot of the young people in the neighborhood come through there doing things that they've not been allowed to do, like play in the dirt, not get in trouble, grow food and eat things that they've never eaten before. But it's also a safe place, you know, where they can just come to gather. Because of COVID, we have not been able to do that in the last 18 months. And I've seen the deterioration in our neighborhood, you know, because our kids have been on lockdown. And a lot of the lockdown left unsupervised, without activities, and for lack of a better word, you know, running amok and left to their own devices. So that's kind of like where I am right about now, trying to just be available to reach out and be there for them in whatever way that they need.
Availability is exactly needed for the work. And you know what? There's no better than being the last and the greatest. And we can't wait to hear your voice. And if I say this wrong, please correct me. But I'm going to say Miss Evelise.
Evelise. Evelise.
Evelise. Thank you, Miss Evelise. I tried to get it, but please forgive me early. But please come in and tell us more, kind of your perspective and a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Maurice and Bernard, for having me, inviting me, and I as well am pleased to be here with these dynamic women who I know personally and know they're doing great things in this community. A little bit about myself. I was raised in the city, went to schools in the city, went away to college, and when I came back, when I graduated, I decided that I wanted to be a part of this community again, since I was raised here, and started getting involved in community organizations. As soon as I graduated from college, I started out with the NAACP. I've served on numerous boards and commissions. I make it my business to still be a part of the community, regardless of where I serve and with who I serve. I've been serving on the police commission for 15 plus years, currently the chair of the police commission. And I think that's important because we need to bridge that gap between the police and the community. I think it's very important. So with my position there, that's something I certainly try to do. But in my other organizations as well, I work with the youth in my sorority. We have programs that work with the youth. I try to definitely assist wherever I can, talk to young people, just be there, because I just feel that it's important to be a role model, particularly coming from this city and being one of them. I think it's important for the youth to see that they too can rise to a level that they may not imagine. So that is part of my mission, to just make sure to be visible and to be present and to be with the young people as often as I can, and as well as with older folks as well, just making sure that we're providing what we need to for the youth in our community.
It's so wonderful that you all have decided at this time in your lives to still want to give back. There is no better place to be than those that really love this community to help these young people see a better way. No matter your background, if you're willing to come in and put in the work, this is exactly what we need. And I give it back to our host, Mr. Maurice Williams.
Okay, thank you. Those are some great introductions. I gotta say, I love my people because you guys are so modest. I've been in this struggle probably for the last 20 something years, and each one of these people on the panel has been leading in the struggle from whatever perspective and where they were at. But it's good that we understand the opportunity we have this morning to speak to the community from a one voice perspective. I want to direct this first question towards Shirley because it was something that I saw during the time when she was at the Family Alliance, and they put together a movie. And the particular movie kind of touched on a young man being in trouble, but through the relationship with the female he was dealing with, she actually got in the bigger part of the trouble by being part of what we would call a co-defendant. And just want to speak from the perspective of our women, and especially the younger women, and Barbara, and I'm sure what we'll do, everybody will get about a minute or two to touch on it, is we know that men are influenced a lot by women and by what they want to be perceived to women. So how do we utilize that, and as we're raising our young women to understand the part and the role that they also play in what happens in our city based on the perception of what men are trying to project as a man? And you guys want to touch on that.
So Maurice, as I thought about this conversation, I also, and thank you for referencing 5K Motion, that was the name of the movie. As I thought about this conversation and in my commitment and concerns which we related to women and girls in the community, it took me back to a project that I was able to publish with Robert Woods Johnson when we were involved with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Clinical Scholars. We published a report where we did several focus groups with young women in the community to understand how they experienced violence in the community. And pretty much what the report found was that, these young women and, their experience with violence was pervasive. For example, what they experienced as violence was not necessarily seen in alignment with violence. For example, healthy, what qualifies as a healthy relationship versus what a unhealthy relationship look like. I recall that there were part of the focus group conversation, one young woman described just being in a fight with her mom and other women in the community, and it wasn't seen as violence. And so the report was called Just Walking Towards It. And the report is available for anyone that wants to, review it. I can certainly share it. But it brought me to I mean, you know, when I thought about this conversation today, it brought me back to some of the things that those young women really described, but they were definitely pervasive and not really, you know, them understanding, you know, how violence is associated, how we relate this to violence. And last, much of the conversation involved the lack of relationships with their fathers and male role models that's really needed in the life of a young woman. I mean, to be able to understand certain dynamics around how we relate to men in our community. So I'm gonna leave it there.
Okay, you guys, everyone has a minute or two to talk on that. Do you want to go next, Leslie?
The last thing that Shirley said that just really struck a chord with me, you know, the relationships that we have with our fathers. You know, there's the saying, you know, that our fathers are our first love, you know, or our first boyfriends, you know, who it is that we model our future relationships with. And I think that is a very important thing to understand. But I also think that a lot of times, I'm not sure where this is going to go, but a lot of how women are looked at from the time that we're young girls until, you know, we're grandmothers, a lot of times our roles in everything and anything is undervalued until the work needs to be done. You know, then you call on the women. You know, the kitchen's dirty, we don't care. The boardroom is messed up, we don't care. The community is jacked up, you know, we don't care. You know, number one, I think because of us being women, we're always busy. Like you said, you know, the women that are on here, you said that, you know, we were so modest, but we're just doing what it is that we do. You know, that's what we do. And a lot of times that undervaluing, I think, starts with us. You know, that we sometimes have a tendency to undervalue our worth, our impact, you know, and so I think that's where it needs to start first. You mentioned about the role of the young women in the lives of these young men, but what about the roles of these young women alone, you know, set apart? Because if we're not strong, if we're not at our best, you know, we're not going to be able to be at our best for anything and anyone else, our children, our partners, our community, you know. So a lot of times, you know, I find, you know, that we as women, you know, we're kind of like secondary. And most of the times, you know, we put ourselves in that role. You know, we don't look at ourselves as being as important as we are, you know, because we're a little bit too busy. We're busy doing, and we have to find that balance. We find that balance with each other. You know, I think we have to find that balance in encouraging each other and encouraging our young women, you know, to understand their value. And if they understand their value, you know, then they can be present, you know, for someone else.
Good, great comments, Barbara?
I kind of feel like women many times are undervalued, not only ourselves, but I think society, and that's one way I look at things more globally, how society undervalues the work that we do and the things that we say. And I come from that saying, there's many things that I talked about many years ago that should happen in our communities, and it wasn't valued. And then 20 years later, someone else will come up with that idea, usually a man, and somehow it's a brilliant idea. And so, I mean, and that's just been how it's been for me. Like, there's so many things that now are happening, men are coming up with, and I'm saying, but I said that 20 years ago, nobody even paid attention to me. So, you know, outer society devalues us too, but we play a major role. And that's why when I first seen the show and I listened to what the men had to say, and what they said was valuable. But I said, well, what about the women? Because we are the mothers. Many of these kids are coming from homes that that are being headed by women. And so we have a firsthand look at what's going on with our children, what our children need, what our community needs. The best years of my career was spent in an elementary school working with young kids, because I felt that's when we need to start reaching our kids from their homes. What's not happening in home as a social worker in the elementary school, we can reach out to these kids. And when we engage our kids and not running from our kids or talking at our kids or about our kids, but actually listening to them, we can find out a lot of things about what it is they need. And a lot of the risk factors around violence are things that our community doesn't have, like a lot of organized recreation, poor schools, violence in the media, violence in our community. Sometimes I'm walking down the street and I see a mother with a little kid, can't be more than a year or two, and they're snatching the kid around, get the F over here, that kind of stuff. And it's just so upsetting, because that's part of the violence that kids are experiencing from a very young age, when they don't even realize that it's happening. And maybe the mother doesn't realize that she's doing that to her child. So we do have to take a good look at ourselves. We also have to look at the outside factors and why we behave the way we do. And that's what I do as a social worker. I look at not only the behavior, but what drives that behavior? What is missing in our community that our kids are not getting? And then I'll tell you one more point, that sometimes the solutions that we come up with are not the best solutions. Sometimes they hurt us. I'll just say one thing, and I know I'm probably going to offend some people, but I just look at putting police in schools. We thought that was a great solution. But once we put police in our schools, normal childhood behavior became a crime. And from that crime, our kids entered a system that was very abusive. And then those kids come back to our community and don't receive any help with what happened to them when they were in those systems. So I'm going to leave it here, because I could talk about this for hours and I only have a few minutes.
Okay, appreciated your thoughts. Elise.
Yes, I just think that it's important when we talk about our young women. A lot of times we do focus on the young men in our community and the violence, but I do think times we have to shift and we have to talk about our young women, and we need to talk to our young women when they're young, especially when it comes to the relationships that they're going to have with the men in their lives and the men in their community. They're starting high school. That's when they're going to start experiencing what they believe is love. Boys are going to show them attention. They're going to show them what they believe is love. But what we need to do as adults is we need to show them healthy love versus unhealthy love, and healthy relationships versus unhealthy relationships, and let them know that just because someone says, I love you, but I'm doing this on the side does not mean it's okay. They can't continue to harbor men who are doing things that are wrong or start to do the wrong things themselves. One of the panelists said about valuing yourself. I think it starts with building the self-esteem of these young women, letting them know that they are worthy from a young age, that they can excel, they can do better things for themselves. They don't necessarily need to do it alone, but they have to start with doing it alone, just wanting to do it themselves. So I just think that once we're mentoring these young women, once we're talking to them, the women in our families, the women in our friend circles, we need to be setting good examples. And if we see something that doesn't look right with the relationship that they're having, we need to let them know that this is not right. We can't just stand back and say nothing. We need to let them know. We need to show them the examples. We have everyone in our friend circles, if we don't have it ourselves, have healthy relationships. So we have to involve those people in their lives to show them that you can have a good love, or you can have a healthy relationship without involving yourself in violence or things that you really have no business being a part of. So I think that we need to start when it's young, when the kids are young. Don't wait until they're 25 and have, 3 or 4 kids to start saying, oh, now, we want you to start doing this. Let them know what their options are when they're young and help them along their way. And I think that we can help a lot of young women that way.
Thank you for those comments.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Shirley.
Well, I just like to add that, when we think about healthy relationships, we can healthy relationships look are much broader than just intimate relationships. When I think about the young people that come to my program that has gotten, involved in some kind of interaction with a parent that's unhealthy. So healthy relationships really can be, applied to relationships with parents, teachers, anyone. And so I do think it's important that we spend some time, not only with our young women, but just really helping our young people understand what is a healthy relationship and what qualifies that. And unfortunately, in our homes, in too many of their homes, they're not, certain things aren't modeled. And you know what? And we can't expect for Shirley to show up one way when Shirley's never been exposed to showing up in this way. Right. Mm-hmm. So now we got mentors, and now there's a need for mentors and others in the community to really support, what that might look like for our young people.
Absolutely.
So that brings me to a thought and a point. So when the resources, whether they be money resources, whether it be the second parent, how do we gap that deficit of resources to help that young woman grow and nurture when she has limited resources? She may not have her dad in the home that can teach her about some of those things that the woman can't teach her about, or with mom working 2 jobs now, she has an extensive amount of free time that may bring her around environments that aren't conducive. So how do we? I know you guys touched on it a little bit when you mentioned that no organized programs for the young people, and that's major, and that's something that we definitely have to sit down with officials at the city to talk about. But just within our local communities, our local neighborhoods, how have we lost that village from which so many of us on this panel grew up with? I mean, if my mom wasn't home or my dad wasn't home, I could go by my aunts, or I can go. Right now, people aren't letting kids go in their homes, and you got all kind of different things going on to where everything is so restrictive. So how do we kind of get back to that village and get some of these restrictions and some of these lack of resources gaps? Because to me, that is, as we're all speaking, that's a major point. And so anyone can go first.
Well, the first thing I thought about when you
everybody
said...
go together, right? Everybody go first, everybody go together. So let's just, let me say that. So Barbara, you can start out.
Yeah, just when you were saying, what can we do? The first thing I thought of is restore that village that we used to have. Like you said, we all looked out for each other. If you look at it, and today the village is so dysfunctional. We live next door to people and we don't even know who they are. So how are we going to look for them to look out for us when we don't even communicate with each other? So those are some of the things that we can do to help our kids. Is let's restore that village. When I see kids, I see them as my kids. When I was in the schools, those were my kids. So I'm doing everything that I can to help those kids. And that's the mentality we have to get back. We can't look at, those are those kids or those those parents. We should be one. That's the way we need to think.
I'll go next if that's okay. I agree with Barbara about reestablishing the village. The village is still there. I just think we just need to re-engage the village. Just speaking from my own experience, I was blessed to have a strong mother in the home. My father passed when I was young, but I had a village, right? Mm-hmm. We had friends, we had family that were constantly around, showing my brother and I, different things that we may not initially been exposed to, but then we were exposed to. And that's why I said earlier about being visible. Have to be visible in the community, have to be visible in these young women's lives. I've had young women come to me in the past to say, hey, I see you come from where I came from and I see what you're doing. how do I get there? So I've taken upon myself to at times mentor someone who needed to get their GED, who felt that, they didn't finish high school, but felt like, okay, if you have a college degree, I don't have a high school degree yet, a diploma, but how do I get there? So I had to take the time to help her to get her GED. I had to identify the resources for her and try to use what I could to make sure that she got those resources. So that's part of the village, is you have to engage. It's not enough to just say, hey, I have 4 aunties and, 5 of my mother's friends. Those aunties and friends need to actually engage that young woman who may be struggling, or even the ones who aren't struggling, but just need a little bit of a push. We have to do that. It's our responsibility. So I think that that's part of re-engaging the village, is talking to people, to saying, hey, reach one, teach one. You can't, reach everybody. You may not be able to handle speaking to 10 women or mentoring 10 women at once, but pick one and work with that young person. If you can just reach one person, I think is worth all the effort. So that's pretty much what I would just say in terms of re-engaging the village, counting on our sisters, friends. We have a lot of sister circles that we get together as adults. Let's try to bring the young people in. Let's try to form our own informal mentoring program. It doesn't have to necessarily be an agency that does it. You just can say, hey, Shirley and I are getting together. Like, maybe we can say, hey, you know what? Let's take a young person with us to this jazz festival that we're going to go to. They may never have been exposed to it, but we have, and we're going. So let's bring them along so they can be exposed to something differently and see a different way of life and make their choices from there.
Like that. So,
thank you.
so Shirley, you're going to continue with the re-engage in the village.
So I think that, first of all, I agree that the village is dysfunctional. And I also agree that the village is still there. But the thing that I think that we have to understand about the village today, because we all have been out here. We've all been, as Maurice alluded to, we've been leaders in the community for many years. And so I have to remind myself, updating myself, that the community looks a little different today than it looked 30 years ago when I got involved in this work, right? There are some things that are still relevant, but there are some things that we need to think about in a different way, using the example that Evelise just talked about, just picking up a young lady and taking her, to a jazz festival or whatever. But the thing that I'm most mindful of, because I understand there are so many, mentoring is like the biggest thing right now. Everybody's talking about mentoring, but as someone who operates several mentoring programs, it's not that easy to get our young people involved in these programs. And it's not easy to get them involved in these programs, because I think one of the things that we need to go back is to build trust in the village. The village don't trust us anymore. There's a lot of mistrust in the village, and there's a lot of mistrust among the individuals that we'd like to support in the village. And so I think it's going to be important that we figure out how we go back and build some trust in the village, how we go back and build some trust among those young people and those families that really need the support that so many of us in the community are still committed to offering.
I have to agree with Shirley saying about building that trust back into the village. And if you don't know somebody, you're really not going to invest any, you're not really going to trust them. And I think one of the things that I learned, I grew up in a big family, and when you have 8 kids, mom got to do what she got to do, and she's going to stretch a half a pound of hamburger, to feed 8 kids. She's going to add a whole lot of stuff to it, but she only got that half a pound of hamburger. And she's going to be inventive with it. She's going to figure out a way, that everybody gets to eat, and it's going to taste good. And I think that's one of the things that we as women are good at. And even in the village, it doesn't. Everything that we're all talking about is important, But what I think is that it doesn't always take resources from outside just to start, just to start. Now it's going to take some to continue it on. But I was astonished when I moved into this neighborhood, and I live in the Hill, and the first couple of days that I was here, while I was sitting on my front porch just checking out the neighborhood, and kids would walk by, and I'd say hi, and they'd look at me like I spoke a foreign language, like what did you say? I'm just saying hello because that's how I grew up. You talk to people, you greet people, but it was something that they weren't used to. So when you start engaging and you start looking at people, looking at our young folks and saying, I see you. I see you. I say hello. I'm not chastising you about what it is you're doing. I'm just acknowledging your presence. You give them a smile, and then when they turn around and walk by the next time, and then they say hello, and that is a start, where they know that, okay, this is, if you want to take it to the extreme, this is a safe person. This is somebody that's looking at me, that sees me. I have a young man in this community that I first met because he was fighting in front of my house. He wasn't fighting me, he was fighting someone else, but they were all up on my porch. And when I went outside, I broke up the fight because they're on my porch and they were smaller than me. So, I could physically handle that. But I didn't call the police. I was just like, y'all need to stop this and go on home. But a couple of years later, I heard some noise outside, and I had interacted with him for a little while. Heard some noise outside in the wintertime. He was shoveling my driveway. He was shoveling my driveway because my driveway had snow in it. And he just thought, let me shovel this nice lady's driveway out. But so because of an act of kindness, that translated years later into him, just like acknowledging that. And those little things, those little things just go such a long way, and that's what it is that we had in the village. You can be up the street cutting up, acting a fool, and auntie so-and-so up there knew about it, and she would talk to you. And before you got home, everybody in the block knew about it. So there are those things, like Barbara said, that we've done, those things that worked in the village. Some of those things can still work now.
Mhm.
We do need a lot more, but at least as a foundation, as a base, that's something that everybody could do, irregardless of the resources that you have. I've applied for grants for, like work in the community, but sometimes I didn't even have time to wait for the grant. You just go ahead and do what it is you got to do on the level that you can do it. So I think as long as we're involved in to some extent, with the young people, we have to be intentional about it. Use the resources that we have, and not be stopped because we don't have something. Tap into somebody else. Use what it is that you have, but at least to be present. At least to be present. At least to let them know, I see you. I see you. You're not that throwaway child. You're not that bad kid. You're not that. Even if your mama said, get your blankety blank over here. But when you look at me, I'm gonna smile and say, it's okay, baby. It's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right. You got to be that auntie. You got to be that mama. You got to be that grandma. That child doesn't have. So I'm gonna hush now.
I just got to throw this in after hearing all this, and just listening to the responses that you gave, and something Miss Shirley said, and I wanted to jump in then when she said that the neighborhoods now, we all are. I want to claim us as we look older now. Let me say that so I don't get beat up on this call. But we've been around a while, and you mentioned that things have changed. How do we, with everything you said, Leslie, how do we deal with the disrespect? Because that's where violence stems from, no respect, the disrespect that people have for people in your community. How do you recondition the new young mind that we have in our communities today that don't respect women, they don't respect the men in their communities? How do we recondition and change the mentality of these young minds to what we grew up with when you talk about a village?
Well, I will have to say that, having tough skin for one is going to help a little bit, and just because you throw it at me doesn't mean I'm going to throw it back at you. That's number one. you can call me everything but a child of God, but if I know who it is I am, I'm gonna let you do that to a certain extent, and say, okay, are you done? Because we got some work to do. Let's move on from that. I'm none of those things that you said, and let's keep it moving. But if you don't want to do that, then I'm gonna go over here, but sometimes you have to shut things down just by not even acknowledging it. If that's your language, that's your language. Now we can both speak that language, but if I take it there, it's going to be a different. It's going to be a lot different because I'm coming from a different place. The disrespect. I think a lot of the disrespect of language comes from. There's so many factors out there. I mean, I didn't dare cuss because it wasn't allowed, but I also didn't hear all that they're hearing now. I didn't hear that, so it didn't become a part of my language. It was selective language that was only pulled out for a certain reason, because I wasn't raised with it. But our kids now, it's allowed on television, it's allowed in the music, but that doesn't mean that I, as the person that you're talking to, have to acknowledge any of that, and just let them know, you may call me this, but I'm not that, and neither are you. I mean, I don't have the specific answers for that. The disrespect is it's out of control, but you can only get a rise out of me with your disrespect if I allow it to get inside of me. And if I don't allow it to get inside of me, then that's going to take away some of that power from you.
So I think it's just like she said, a lot of it, a lot of the reasons that our village looks so different is because we've normalized so many things. And she was speaking of, we've normalized so many things that we just didn't have. Like, say for instance, I'll just talk about me personally. If I'm talking and I cuss my kids, Mom, you cussing? Because they never heard that. And then I think back, when I was being raised, I never heard that from my parents either. So it wasn't a normal thing. But the kids today, and like I said, some of them hear from their mothers at 1 and 2 years old. Probably their fathers too. And I've just seen mothers doing it. They hear it at 1 and 2 years old. So where does that child learn self-worth? And that's where it begins. If you don't value your own life, you're not going to value other people's lives around you. And a lot of that has to start with building that self-worth inside their home and then let it go out.
So if I hear this right, re-engaging the village starts with trust and relationships that start within the home. So if we all take our accountability of what a community means, which is a common union, if we go to each home and we start trusting and building relationships stronger in each home, then we will produce love in communities. Because what I see from even when I was in the street back in the days to now, there is no love. And we talk about it so many times how there isn't any love. My thought was, I'm not going to let anybody on this call think that I never was in a situation where I really wanted to hurt a young man in this community. But what I always thought of and what always helped me was I didn't want his family to be in that front row. So that piece of love and the piece of conscience in my mind of not wanting to see his family in that front row allowed me not to commit the violence. Because what I always knew was you're going to die an instantaneously death. You're going to die within 1, 2, 3 minutes. Some people pass the next morning or whatever. It's instantaneous when you think about it in time. And me taking that person's life that I didn't create is going to make that family suffer for the rest of their life. And I didn't want to be a part of that. And so we are trying to, this cause really helped me because you guys brought up a lot of factors that are the symptoms that lead to violence. And a lot of calls and a lot of discussions that I've been a part of, we're never tackling those symptoms that lead to the violence. We always talk about the violence. We always talk about the people who passed. We always talk about we got to do better. But this call has started reaching the parts of where it starts.
Mhm.
And it starts at home. You gotta be a respectable young kid when you come out. My dad used to tell me, I had 2 older sisters. If anything happens to your sisters while you guys are on the route to school or back, I'm holding you accountable. And I used to look at him like, I'm the youngest. How you gonna hold me accountable? Because he made me know that you are to protect your sisters. We are to protect our women in our community, and we're not doing that. Unfortunately, out of these numbers that we have this year, 4 women, 2 domestic. We have to really address this. We really have to understand that whatever the root cause is, we got to reach it. And I'm hearing it's recreating that village. And some of it is institutional now because some things we can't control. DCF, you can't hit the kids no more. Certain things that help us to be stronger youth as we grew up, because you had respect for your mother and dad because you know she wasn't playing, or you, like my mom got to the point she was popping me so much. I was like, what you gonna, like, what I'm gonna do? I gotta be right. So these issues that we brought up today, I think is a great start for some issues that need to come out directly in our community and talking to people. Mentoring was a big one that you guys mentioned. I like that to be continued, but I really like that training that's going to come from the home to make that woman have her self-worth and come out in the community and know how to conduct when she's interacting in relationships with men. That's going to be a key one for me. So we're about 4 minutes off. So I'm gonna give everybody a minute to go around and have some last thoughts, but this will not be our last discussion. In all fairness, if we gave the men 2 times, we gotta at least give the women 2 times. And then we're gonna bring a couple of more perspectives. I do wanna hear from the law enforcement perspective. I do wanna hear from some political perspectives. And if you guys are all with me, at the end, we're gonna do a big town hall meeting to bring everybody together. And everybody will be able to speak for about a minute and a half on the different topics. And at that time, I want some of the panelists that's been a part of the shows to help put the questions out there so we can address this in front of all. Because we're glad that we're starting to grow a nice contingency of people that listen to the show, but we know we have so many more people out here in the community that we have to reach. So with the last 4 or 5 minutes, we're gonna go around the panelists and everybody just give some parting words. And we definitely wanna thank you for being a part of the show. Evelise, we'll start with you.
So thank you. In closing, I mean, I just wanna say I agree with everything that was said today. I think with re-engaging the villages, just going back to the basics. Just touching on one thing that Leslie said in terms of acknowledging the young people. A simple hello. If you're walking into a corner store, if you're walking down the street and you see a group of young people together, just say good morning, just say good afternoon. Really don't realize how much that is going to impact someone, because they may think that they're invisible, but someone has seen them and someone has acknowledged them. And you may not see the fruits of that at that moment, but I think along the line, it makes a big difference to just engage and let the person know that, hey, you are someone. Good morning, how are you? How was your day? I think going back to the basics is a way of re-engaging the village. And I think it's something that we all have to do as adults. Don't discount the young people because they're walking around with their pants hanging down, or you think that they may be doing something nefarious in the street. Just simply speak to them and let them know that they are someone and they are worthy. And I think starting there, then we can build upon that with resources that we have within ourselves, within our homes, and resources within the community. And I thank you for having me, and thank you for everything.
I'll go quick. I think we got about 2 minutes. Everybody got about 30 seconds. Barbara?
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for giving us another opportunity, because there's so much to be said in so little time. But I agree with everything that was said in this thing, but like I said from the beginning, instead of just focusing on behavior, let's start looking at the root causes of that behavior, because that's where the real work is, eliminating those root causes. And also, as we look at what we can do in our homes, let's also pay attention to the systems that also impact our communities and our people. And in doing my prison work, I see a lot of stuff that's impacting women in prison and the destruction that's happening to them. And so all of this is important. So thank you very much.
Shirley.
So first of all, thank you for the invitation to join this conversation. And I think it's been a really fruitful conversation. However, I'm hoping to be a part of other conversations because, you know, the touching on root causes, accountability, and some of those things, I would really like to have us think about what those things can look like in our community, because that's the only way we're gonna bring about healthier communities.
Thank you. Leslie.
If it's not in the home, then the village has to have it and to be able to support the home, because somebody out there has that needed cup of sugar, you know, that you need. But I would also like to say, I don't want to see another town hall meeting. How about a call to action? What about a call to action? Let's stop talking about this and let's put some boots on the ground, some pen to paper. All of these folks that you're talking about, the men, the women, law enforcement, municipal, let's get in a room, let's get at the table, let's break out into work groups, and let's come out of there with at least something that's not going to cost, you know, $2.9 million, something that we can do today. Because there's stuff, I know that if there's something that I could do today, there's something that we all collectively can do today. And it's not another town hall meeting. I appreciate that, but let's have a call to action. Let's do some work. Let's not talk about it. Let's be about it.
Absolutely.
Okay, she has spoken. No town hall meeting. Let's call to action. I'm a person that anybody who knows me, I'm with what the people are with. And whatever is going to get us there and what solution is going to get us there, I'm with it. So we can do it in a call to action plan. It can be a weekend series. We can do whatever you guys want to do, but it always starts with each other. We're better together. Just remember that phrase. We're going to do better together because we're going to reinvent this village in New Haven and get this straightened out because we're losing too many of our young ones. So that's our time. I thank everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Be productive and fruitful, and may God bless your efforts.
Thank you.
Baby.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah.
This is Harry Drills, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven.
Gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah.